It's a great honor and a great pleasure to be back at EGA after, I think, 13 years of a break. It's been amazing. It's amazing to listen to Kat. It's amazing to talk to all of you about the journey. And of course, we talk at this conference about drugs as a technology. And my talk is going to be about technology as a drug. This talk comes with a rating. And the rating of this talk is P for paranoid, K for cray-cray, and D for dystopian. And I mean this very sincerely. If you have ever had a paranoid disorder or a thought disorder, I am advising you for your own mental health that you leave the room now, because there are parts of this talk that will make you feel uncomfortable. And it's the last thing that I want to do tonight, to make anyone feel uncomfortable. So please, take care of yourselves. Now for the rest of us, because all of us are going to need it, I would like you to meet the Tinfoil Troop. Come forward, kids. They're going to be handing out sheets of tinfoil to you so that you folks can give yourselves the kind of protection that we're going to need over the next 45 minutes and probably for the rest of our lives. Just so you're clear, I am already protected. So on the 1st of May this year, an article appeared in the Australian. That article reported that Facebook had been shopping around a little presentation deck, and they've been shopping it around to the biggest companies in Australia. They shopped it around to Australia's largest advertisers. And that deck showed that Facebook had developed such sophisticated monitoring techniques, analysis tools, that they could tell when kids as young as 14 were feeling stressed and defeated and overwhelmed and anxious and nervous and silly and a failure. And Facebook told those advertisers they could pinpoint exactly when those kids were feeling exactly that way and exactly when they would be able to use a confidence boost. In other words, buy this, kid, and you'll feel better. Now, Facebook immediately issued an apology. They admitted that it was wrong to target young children this way. God, it sounds like the Catholic Church. But that wasn't a sales pitch that was put together by a rogue Facebook employee. That deck had been authored by the managing directors of Australia's Facebook operations. And that was not the first time that Facebook had been exposed as a bit of a manipulator. It was 2014. There was a paper that was published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. And the researchers who wrote the paper revealed that they demonstrated something called emotional contagion. It means that when you're sad, you can make someone else sad, or when you're happy, you can make someone else happy without them even really knowing it. And Facebook did this by manipulating the news feeds of 689,000 Facebook users. Now, Facebook controls all of the items that appear in your news feed, and so it was easy to adjust the content on these news feeds. Some news feeds got more positive items, and the moods of those users, they ticked upwards. Some feeds got more negative items, and the moods of those users ticked downwards. Facebook adjusted things. As a science experiment, it was a roaring success, but there was a problem because, you see, Facebook didn't tell any of the 689,000 people that it was manipulating their moods. And as soon as that became clear, Facebook apologized. They admitted that it was wrong to emotionally manipulate their users that way. Now, in the closing days of 2017, about 2 billion people are getting their news from the Facebook news feed. The average Facebook user is using the news feed for 50 minutes a day. That's a lot of time by a lot of people staring at a lot of Facebook. The news feed must be very interesting if people are spending so much time looking at it. Now, how it got that interesting is a very interesting story itself. Facebook went public in May of 2012, and because it was a public company, it had to bring revenue to all of its shareholders. Now, Facebook, what does it do? It makes its money by selling targeted advertising. It profiles you and it aims ads at you. Now, one way they can make more money off of ads is have more users looking at more ads. And that was pretty easy because everyone was joining up Facebook. And as everyone joined up, more people joined up. That was easy. It's called a network effect. Facebook needed more. They needed more than just growing their number of users. They needed those users to spend more time on the site. They needed, the phrase they used was, they needed to increase user engagement. And that's where things get very interesting because it's how they increased user engagement that put us in the pickle we're in today. Because Facebook profiles its users. Now, in its earliest days, that simply meant it kept track of what you like and what you dislike and who you friend and so on. But from around 2013, as they tried to increase user engagement, that profiling got a lot more sophisticated. Computers grew fast enough and they grew cheap enough that computers could start to learn. Machine learning is an amazing thing. It's very, very hungry for data. And Facebook had built the platform to keep those systems fed with everything that you do on Facebook. So every time you open the Facebook app, everything you do, every swipe, every scroll, every click through, every article you read, how long you read it, whether you share it, how long it is until you open the app again, all of that is feeding into Facebook's profiling system. And it's grown well beyond a profile. I want you to think of it as a tiny little simulation of you. It's a simulation of your behavior, at least while you're using Facebook. And that simulation of you is used by Facebook to make decisions when they curate your newsfeed. Now, that word curate is a very, very funny one. I prefer to use the word censor. So Facebook chooses what goes into your newsfeed, and it uses your profiles to make decisions about what goes into your feed. Do you like something? Do you hate it? Do you share it? Do you engage? Do you disengage? All of that goes into this machine learning profile, and your profile now knows exactly how to give you what you want in order to keep you engaged. Because it's constantly watching your engagement. It's constantly adjusting itself to keep that engagement up. In essence, it's basically modeling you so well that it can start to read your mind. And there's an unexpected side effect that came along with giving people what they want in their news feed. Because, well, I have some bad news for you. All of us, every single one of us, are at heart narcissists. Now, there's actually no shame in admitting that. Most of us spend our lives trying to grow beyond this, but underneath all of those layers of socialization, deep down inside, we want to be right. We crave it. We need it. Being right satisfies a fundamental narcissistic need in us. And that explains that very well-studied phenomenon in psychology known as cognitive bias. We tend to focus on the things that agree with the things we believe, and we tend to ignore the things that disagree with our beliefs. Now, that's the way we are. We spend our lives trying to live beyond that state. But now we are deeply engaged with the machine learning system that seeks to engage us by amplifying our cognitive bias. That is the secret of the Facebook newsfeed. It gives us what we want to see. And what we want to see are the things that confirm what we believe about the world. And so, to increase user engagement, what happened was Facebook built a global cognitive bias amplifier. Facebook is now a global scale artificial intelligence, keeping all of its users under continuous surveillance, doing everything in its power to keep all of its users using it by showing those users exactly what they want to see. That's the actual shape of the world at the end of 2017. And I think you now understand why I gave you a very clear and specific warning about people who have paranoid disorders not attending this talk. Because Facebook is literally a global mind control machine. And that has created a big problem for us, a big, obvious problem, because we've started to believe that what Facebook tells us is true. After all, it's in our news feeds, and news is true, and it's what we want to believe is true, so of course it's true, isn't it? Well, no. A cognitive bias amplifier is feeding you what you want to see. It's feeding you what you want to see without any respect for the truth. So what's happened is we've been accelerating away from the truth and into our own little worlds. And each of them are a very custom, highly specific expression of our cognitive biases. Now, back in February, BuzzFeed published this really interesting article. It did a detailed analysis of two Facebook accounts, a conservative mother and her lefty daughter. They showed the daughter's feed to the mother and the mother's feed to the daughter. Neither could believe what the other was seeing. It was as if they came from completely different realities, which they did. And so if we're wondering why our politics seems so strident these days, why it is so hard to find agreement, why it's hard to find common ground upon which we can build workable consensus, remember this. 2 billion people are learning about the world by engaging with a cognitive bias amplifier that confirms their beliefs, entrenches their beliefs, and tends to make those beliefs more extreme. Now, that is bad. And it would be a great thing if we could just stop using Facebook, right? But how? After 4 years of seeing what we want to see, we feel comfortable, very comfortable, in a world that conforms to our prejudices. The real world would seem very ugly and very unfriendly. It makes us feel wrong and bad. No one wants to feel wrong and bad. So we keep on using Facebook. There is no easy way to put this, people. We are addicted. This isn't just something that we've become habituated to. It is destroying our mental health. It is eroding our cognitive capacity, and it is corroding the public sphere, and yet we can't seem to quit it. When we finish up here, and we are just getting started, people, trust me. When we finish up here, you're going to go back to Facebook despite everything I've just told you about Facebook being bad for you. It's not rational. Of course it's not rational, because this isn't about reason. This is about addiction. Facebook is a drug. It's a dangerous, addictive drug. There are 2 billion addicts. Welcome to the first oh shit moment of the era of global artificial intelligence. Skynet was not supposed to look like this. Skynet was supposed to be going sentient and firing the missiles. It was supposed to be some evil intelligence. It wasn't supposed to look like the Pied Piper leading us all to ruin. So, say hello to the age of surveillance capitalism. This is where artificial intelligence plus surveillance, pervasive surveillance, seems to be designed to serve your needs, but in reality what it's doing is it's depriving you of your free will. Now, I have some more bad news. Facebook may have built this bomb, but because they did, now everyone knows how to build one. Because it doesn't matter whether Facebook goes away tomorrow. It doesn't matter if all of us stop using Facebook tomorrow. Because we now know how to build global-scale artificial intelligences that can manipulate entire populations. That's quite an achievement, sort of. I want you to consider the humble and extremely evil Pokey machine. That machine is already very carefully programmed to provide irregular rewards to your dopaminergic system. It is the best way we know to evoke compulsive behavior in a human being. And the designers of Pokies have studied them. They embody this in their designs. Now, let's take that up a level. Let's say that there's a camera in a casino that's feeding a sophisticated artificial intelligence that can recognize facial expressions, can even read the sweat beads off the forehead, and then feed that back into the Pokey's results. And then the entire environment of the casino would be watching, and it would be learning, and it would be responding in a way that best produces compulsive behavior. I mean, that's what Facebook has done. Why wouldn't Crown? So this is what the world actually looks like across a century, where our machines observe and learn from and manipulate our behavior, where influence is being weaponized. And it won't stop there, because all of these techniques, they are now overflowing into every system that we have that's connected. Each of them are learning and responding in just the way they know they need to get us to do what they want. Everything in the world is now starting to use all of the data collected about you to move you. And that's why this isn't really a story about Facebook. This is a story about us. Because once we learn how to do something, once we acquire a new tool, we tend to apply it relentlessly and recklessly. So one of the subtexts of EGA this year is the medicalization of psychedelic drugs. It's something that many have long wanted. It's legitimacy. It's also something we need to dread. Because the moment that surveillance capitalism engages with psychedelic drugs, the race for soma is going to be well and truly on. And we will watch ourselves as we learn how we react to these substances, and we will tune them until they are exactly what we need to put ourselves squarely in the power of others. That's how this world works. That's how more and more aspects of our world works. And that's why, back at the beginning, I asked folks to leave this room, because this is not a dystopian novel by Philip K. Dick. This is the 21st century. Now, you might be thinking, Jesus, Mark, that's horrible. Please, please, stop. We're not done yet. It gets weirder. We already have all of this technology of surveillance capitalism that's designed to watch you and learn about you and undermine you. All of that is about to combine with a new technology that's just emerging, one that's going to take us to a new level. Hold on, there's a costume change. It's Christmas morning, just a few years from now. Look what Santa has brought the kids. It looks pretty much like a thick pair of sunglasses, weighs about as much as a cheap smartphone. It's self-contained. You pop them on, they power up automatically, and all of a sudden you're seeing the world differently. Well, it's the world plus. You're seeing things that aren't really there. They look real. They act real. You treat them as though they're real. Welcome to the world of augmented reality. Augmented reality is the next big thing. Everyone agrees on this. It's the thing that's going to get you to stop staring down into your screen of your smartphone all day long. It will get you looking up and out and engaged with the world around you. A world that's better than it was. A world that's more interesting than it was. A world that is finely tuned to your tastes and your needs. Now this year, at its big developer conference. Now, do you know what the big Facebook developer conference is named? Anyone? You want to shout it out? Fate. I'm not making that up. All right. At the big developer conference, Mark Zuckerberg walks out on stage and opens up his keynote promising these augmented reality spectacles in a couple of years. Facebook is working really hard to make these a reality. Now, here's the important thing. Here's the thing that no one is telling you about augmented reality. It has to see the world around you in order to do the things that it does, because otherwise you'd have virtual things materializing in the middle of other things, kind of like a really bad Star Trek transporter accident. So augmented reality to work has to maintain a state of constant surveillance. Augmented reality is a technology of surveillance. And Facebook is going to love augmented reality. They love watching your every move. Augmented reality for Facebook is a hypodermic needle plugged right into your experience. It feeds it all right back into Facebook. And when it gets fed into Facebook, it gets fed into your profile. That profile already determines what shows up in your news feed. Now Facebook is going to use that profile to determine what shows up in your reality. It's going to fashion your own private world on the fly. Facebook will be curating your reality. It will be delivering the best of all possible worlds. All you need to do in return is to give Facebook access to your eyes. Of course, in reality, what's happened? We've already given Facebook our eyes. 50 minutes a day, we're sitting there staring into the news feed. Facebook is sitting there telling us what we want to hear. Of course, the example I've just given you feels different than what we feel day to day because it doesn't feel like looking down at the screen. The screen feels like it's at a safe distance because it's not part of us. Now, the screen may be at the end of our arms, but that doesn't mean it's not already completely inside our heads. There's a shadowing firm some of you may have heard of called Cambridge Analytica. Cambridge Analytica used everything that I just talked about to send political messages that were very carefully targeted and profiled to Brexit voters and to Trump voters, targeting them for exactly when they were most vulnerable to the messages. Now, that's no different than what Facebook is doing with vulnerable teenagers, but the outcomes there are not financial, they're political. Weaponized influence is the new technology of power. So we have to ask ourselves, are there ways to undermine that power before it becomes completely entrenched? Think back, 10 years ago, before everyone had a smartphone, before everyone had jumped on Facebook, we had a public social sphere. It was digital, it was connected, it was open, it was free. All of that has gone away. Facebook has sucked all of the air out of the room, or rather, we've taken our eyes away from anything that's not Facebook. If a group doesn't exist on Facebook, we don't join it. If an event isn't promoted on Facebook, we don't hear about it. If a friend isn't on Facebook, we just gradually drift away. We need to hit the rewind. We need to remember how we did things before Facebook, how we created and grew our communities. And that's going to involve moving some muscles that we really haven't had to use in years. That's going to be clumsy, it's going to hurt. But for every move that we make for ourselves, every move we make away from Facebook, we create a little bit of room. Now, we are living in a world where billions of people are generating their personal realities from what they're seeing on Facebook. And all of us live with those billions. We have to give those billions an alternative. And I don't mean a new, better Facebook, because this is not about technology. This is about us. We have to have a think about how we can come together, how we can share together, how we can learn together, how we can do together. And we need to get that right, because right now it is completely wrong. Cognitive bias amplification makes it so hard to live with the differences of others that what we do is we tend to seek deeper immersion in our own cognitive biases. What we're doing is we're turning up the volume to drown out the voices of others. So really, there's only one question left. What can we do? What can any of us do against the kinds of titanic forces? And these are trillion-dollar accumulations of capital and influence, and they're backed up by nation-states that have every possible resource at their disposal. So how can any of us really hope to hold on to whatever remains of ourselves? Well, I have 3 suggestions. First, we need to be a bit suspicious about all the amazing digital wonders the world is offering up. But remember, when it's free, you are the product. You are being bought and sold in real time to the highest bidder, and that bidder has access to parts of yourself that you don't even know about. These systems study you so intently. They know you better than you know yourself, so you are right to be suspicious of them. A healthy paranoia is not the worst possible quality to possess in a world of surveillance capitalism. Now, that paranoia shouldn't leave you withdrawn behind a tinfoil hat. It should leave you ready to engage and ready to defend yourself and the people that you love. So my first bit of advice for you, know your substance. Now, the next bit of advice concerns the whole problem that we have in a world where truth and lies have become so very mixed up. I ask you to do something. Don't believe a word I've said. Don't take any of this as truth just because I've said it. Go and do the research yourself. come to your own conclusions. These days, nearly everything we see and we hear comes to us secondhand. It is filtered and massaged by so many layers of machines, it's hard to know the provenance of anything anymore. And if we can't tell where it comes from, who it comes from, how can we trust it? You know, throughout all of the last days of reality, we are progressively losing touch with the evidence of our own senses. So we are instead taking the invisible word of others. I want you to ask yourselves, who told me this? Why are they telling me this? Why do they believe this? Who else are they trying to convince? And if you can't answer these questions, can you adopt a critical distance? Can you laugh at it? Can you be skeptical of it? Can you be particularly skeptical of the things you actually want to believe? Is it possible to take the news feed less seriously? I mean, can we think of it in the same way we think of a frosty beer or a pleasant glass of wine? It's very nice once in a while, but it's something that's toxic if you take it in too high a dose. If we can't read the label on the bottle, if we can't know where it was produced and who made it, how can we possibly trust the contents? I mean, let me put this more broadly. There's a free pill there. Go on, it's free, you'll like it. Do you take it? Okay, I know in this room, yeah, but generally, no, it's a bad idea. So the next advice is simply this. Know your source. Finally, we need to practice a little bit of mindfulness. How do we feel when we engage with Facebook? What is the effect of this digital drug on us? Is it making us feel happy, sad? Does it leave us with a fear of missing out? Does it always leave us wanting more and more and more? Could we leave it for an hour, for a day, for a month? How does that thought make you feel? Ask yourself those questions, because now you're getting a good look at your relationship to Facebook. And that works for every other social media, Twitter and Instagram and Snap, all of those. Do you like what you see? Is your relationship healthy? Is it helping you to be the person that you want to be? We need to ask these questions, and we need to remember to ask them again and again and again until we have a range of answers from a range of different moods that we can start to feel like we can trust. Because we have to understand, this isn't Facebook. This is Facebook plus us. It always is. It's your mind. It's my mind. It's your brain. It's my brain. It's your being and my being that are creating something here. Facebook is amplifying it, but it's all in us, and it's all happening to us. So my final recommendation, know yourself. Now, all of this is hard yakka. I know. These are not easy times, but it may be possible. It may be possible before the machines close in around us and everything becomes utterly artificial forever. It may be possible to find within ourselves the touchstone that keeps us firmly anchored in the real. It's worth a try. Thank you.
It's not actually a question, it's just something you might like to be interested in. One of the interesting studies coming out of the one of the interesting things coming out of the microdosing studies is that people significantly drop their social media presence.
I do like that, you're right. All right, so we probably need to start compiling an inventory of techniques as people learn things. And the nice thing about the era of sharing is when someone learns something and it's good, it's very easy to help everyone else learn about it. And so if we have these different techniques, not all techniques are going to work for everyone, but if we share them, we'll find the right set of them. That's great.
Does that mean that macro dosing also results in...
I have not tried to use Facebook tripping. I can't imagine.
So obviously these technologies can be used for good as well. And how do we therefore shift our mindset or the creator's mindset to use them in a way that facilitates connection and accuracy and truth?
You ask a really Awesome, excellent question. Thank you. And this has become, because my world is technology, this has become, I think, a very fundamental part of the conversation that the technology community is asking itself right now, because we're seeing these profound examples of things having gone off the rails. And it's, I think, where we lose the balance around what these things are good for versus who they're being good for. And where that balance is confused, you get bad results. So if you say that Facebook is good because it's a sharing tool and helps people learn better, that's great. But if it does this by cognitive bias amplification, then that's bad. And so we have to sort of unroll one thing from another. I don't know that Facebook can necessarily do that because they've effectively built their business model around this. And this is so they've painted themselves into a corner. In a lot of ways, Facebook is just as trapped as everyone else. But as I say, this is a technology that's being employed across the entire culture now. So we now have to take a very nuanced view about when something is watching us, how is that information then being used? Because what we've now seen is that information is being taken in and being turned against us. And so if we can't see, and again, this is the know your substance, if you can't see transparently the loop of how that information is being used and being fed back to you, then you shouldn't trust it as a user, but you shouldn't be building it as a creator.
Hi, my question's a bit about how you touched on using these muscles we haven't used before, and it's
For a while anyway, yeah.
Yeah, and it's getting back to how do we compensate for the convenience that Facebook gives us in terms of group meetings and disseminating information to our friends and things like that.
Yeah.
How do we overcome that? Because that's such a big pull.
I know I completely agree with you on that, but the problem is that I guess the whole value proposition around that hasn't been revealed. Yeah, it's easy, but it's poisonous, right? It would be like eating Maccas all the time. Yes, it's easy. Yes, it's delicious, and yes, you're going to need a heart transplant, sir, right? And so I guess it's that the more we understand the consequential nature of these systems, the easier it is to go, okay, I know this system is harder, but it's better. Now that's, I think, going to carry us just a little while. Again, it's up to us all as a community to think not in terms of the tools, but to think in terms of what we want as outcomes, and then go to the tools makers and say, these are the outcomes we want. Because a lot of what happens in technology is we get a tool and then create a rationale around it. What we want to do is turn that around. What do we want? What are the goals of community? Then make tools that support that.
I'm going to play a little bit of devil's advocate on the cognitive bias thing.
Excellent.
Mostly because I agree with you,
Yep.
and I think all media companies, not just Facebook, are inherently evil, and all they're trying to do is sell us shit. But
Yes, but they haven't built a global AI to do it.
well, I think probably not as effective.
They will. They
Not as
will. Don't
effective,
get me
yeah.
wrong. They will.
But my point is, isn't cognitive bias the way we choose our friends anyway? Especially now in a global community, we tend to surround ourselves with people who think the way we think, like the things that we like, and so like I don't know that Facebook is evil, but I don't know that they're uniquely evil. It's just the way we are, isn't it?
And that's why I spent a long time, and that's why there was that slide with the I love me out there. You're absolutely right. Cognitive bias is part of what we are. It's also infantile. And so the adult sees the infantile impulse, gives it its appropriate room, and then behaves as an adult the rest of the time. And that's part of how we mature as individuals, is we don't just continually gratify what is effectively an infantile impulse, but we actually know for our own growth that we have a mix of impulses and a mix of selections. That's something that we don't necessarily articulate culturally because it's never been so easy to simply be cognitively biased, all right? In some ways, cognitive bias is just culture, and all the different cultures that have emerged around the world are the products of that, all right? But you now are adding the digital elements, and they're amplifying aspects, and Facebook in particular is amplifying aspects. And so there are new qualities that are being exposed because of this. And we need to be very careful around them because of those new qualities. But you're right, they're taking traits that are innate within us, and they are amplifying.
I was struck by the fact that your suggestions at the end were exclusively pitched in terms of individual responses. I wonder whether, therefore, in your talk, you kind of disentangled in any way the trajectory of the techno-logos on the one side and the political economy on the other. Because one of the obvious sort of responses I would have thought of would be, let's put these kind of corporations under public control. And if we did so, would that make a major difference, or would essentially we get the same thing in some other form?
So this is the reason. I will now tell you the reason. By the way, all of this work is drawn from an 8,000-word essay that was just published in Meanjin, which is published through the Melbourne University Press. I hope you all get a chance to read it. I address this point directly in that essay. Here's the reason. 7 years ago, a lovely woman by the name of Dana Boyd published a blog piece in which he said, Facebook has now become absolutely indispensable to social culture. It's a monopoly, it's a utility, and utilities get regulated. All right? So she said that 10 years ago. You know who was saying that in July? Steve Bannon. And here's the interesting thing about that. Because if we don't do this right, what happens is we regulate these monopolies, and then there is a tacit agreement to provide instruments of state power control through these media monopolies in return for the media monopoly. This is exactly what China is doing right now with Baidu, Tencent, and Alibaba, and the social credit system, which you can Google, and you'll see exactly how it's all working. So we have to be extraordinarily careful about that. I'm not saying we shouldn't regulate, but the dangers in this are extremely high, and the level of transparency has to be equivalently high.
You made the mention of knowing your source.
Yes.
I think the name of your talk is The End of Reality, right?
Yes.
It could equally be called The End of Veracity.
Yes.
Because I find as a journalist and an author, one of the hardest things is how much time I have to keep tracking back and back and back through my sources to actually find out how accurate they are.
Yeah.
And now at the highest levels, you've got people promoting ideas like alternative facts.
Yeah.
It seems like our whole grip on truth, or what is really true, is shifting.
Yeah, there's this lovely line from Robert Anton Wilson: reality is the place that rival gangs of shaman fought to a standstill. And I think what we're seeing that perhaps more clearly than we used to. It used to be sort of going on behind the scenes, and it seems like it's actually become a forward feature in culture. And I agree with you. I mean, I think part of the job now, particularly around journalism, is to help develop both techniques for transparency for journalists, but also for the public, so that the public have a better way to be able to check themselves. And we're not always going to want to do that. That's why I'm saying we always have to check that impulse to believe the news report that confirms what we want to believe. And part of what we're maybe learning around this, in a world where we've gone from too little information, all right, where information was scarce, to now where information is hyperabundant, is how we actually deal with veracity, how we deal with truth, how we deal with epistemology in that world. And this is one aspect of that.
I just have a question based on what you were saying there about it not being specific to a company or group of companies.
Right.
Is there ways that we can be immune to the influence then? So, for example, if we block all ads, or we just develop a mindset where we pay zero attention to ads, how much difference does that make? And are there other things we can do as well so that they might be collecting all this data, but it doesn't impact on us as much?
Okay, so let me give you an example of what I'm talking about here. In New York City, I was just over in Manhattan. How many of you have been to Manhattan lately? They have these lovely public stations that are set up called the Links, all right? You can charge your phone on them. You get free Wi-Fi on them. They're all over Manhattan. They're starting to spread out to the boroughs. Google has put them in as part of Project Sidewalk to make the cities more livable. And those things are gathering data on every mobile phone that walks by. And oh yeah, that's right, they also have cameras, and they're using facial recognition software, so they actually are tracking everyone as they walk by in the cities. And the cities are doing this because they want all the free services that are being offered by Google, and Google is using this to harvest data. And this is what I'm saying is around the forces that are in play here, and the ways that they're popping up kind of don't have anything to do with what's going on in your web browser. It has overflowed the web browser and is now a physical feature in the world around us. And that's how we have to now start negotiating our way through the world.
You mentioned briefly about gambling machines.
Yes.
And I also, I've been reading recently that some people are seeing loot box mechanics in video games increasingly as gambling machines. I was wondering if you could talk about that.
One of the great benefits/curses of modern neuroscience is we understand the dopamine reward system a little too well these days. And so we can build systems that are designed to interact with, to feedback with the dopamine reward system. And they can be done in a poker machine, they can be done in loot boxes in games, but basically any system that can have programmatic features can now be triggering rewards and changeable rewards at irregular points that will produce these compulsive behaviors. And so again, this is, I guess, biological knowledge that's being weaponized. And again, these are where people who are building these systems, people who are writing the code for a poker machine, why are they doing this? Do they understand what they're doing? Do they understand the consequential nature of building something that's essentially undermining our biological selves? And so we do have to look at that, and that's also why these machines need to be transparent and inspectable. I think if people actually more broadly understood what a poker machine does, that it's designed to make people into addicts, that is what it's designed to do, that maybe they would regard them with a higher degree of suspicion. Maybe even our politicians would, though they get billions of dollars a year from them. Don't know.
I've got a 3.5-year-old daughter, and
Yes.
what sort of advice would you give to a parent? I'm not a Luddite. I use technology. I
Yeah.
just don't use social media.
Yeah.
What sort of advice could you, off the cuff, give to someone that's going to be having a child in this environment, and how
Right.
to possibly navigate it? Because I'm often at a loss. I do consider this, but I pull up a blank quite often.
So I need to start off, I'm not a parent, all right? But what I've seen other parents who are really good at this do is they de-emphasize, particularly at the youngest age, they de-emphasize virtual experience over real experience. There's some screen time, right? Some, a little bit, but it's just a little bit. It's never used to shut the kid up or anything like this, or to keep the kid amused in that way. It's just it's like sugar. You give them tiny little amounts of it, and then you just give them as much experience as possible, and you let them have experience of the world, experience of social connections, all of these things. And in some sense, that's just kind of common sense, right? You just want to be able to give them their basic experience and their basic capacities. As they get older and they find friends doing things and they need to negotiate that, and that's going to happen in a few years with your child, right? Part of it's because there's going to be an enormous drive because of capital to get kids into these systems as quickly as possible, right? So that they can be providing data into these systems at a young age. You have to now establish the boundaries for your child until they're old enough to sort of take the wheel, which is going to be sometime in their teenage years. Yeah. Yes.
What are the basic safeguards that everyone should be taking in terms of protecting your own privacy?
Okay. Password manager, right? Use lots of different passwords and use a password. I don't know any of my passwords except the password to my password manager because I don't need to, right? And change your passwords a lot. That's good. Virtual private network, or VPN, which hides your IP address, and Tor browser as a basic browsing security tool for when you're going places that you don't want to be seen going. I think those three things are a really good start to being secure. Now, here's the thing. Security is A, never perfect, and B, always a moving target, right? And so you can never trust things to be perfect. You can just trust that you can make it difficult for someone. And then the degree of difficulty is who's going after you. Because as someone in this hall has said to me, look, if Mossad or the NSA wants you, they're going to get you, right? That's it. Don't worry about that. It's the other folks, the folks who don't have infinite resources. And if you need to be protected from them, those simple steps will make things sufficiently hard for you.
Mark, thanks very much.
You've been awesome. Thank you very much.
Happy birthday again, and thanks
Thank
for
you.
the cranial space blankets.